Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Kelly Olczak. I'm grateful that you guys are joining us. We're going to wait just a minute or two. We have about 13 people that are going to join us. We're going to start the discussion in 3 minutes. I see some familiar faces on our attendee list. It's nice to see you, Mike and Julia and John. Tim, it's nice to have somebody new here. I am going to mute my phone. Almost forgot that. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and start right now. So again, hi, everybody. I'm sure you've known at least one of these people on this slide deck if you've watched The Sopranos. So Tony was really good for delivering. Sorry, the guy on the left is famous for a discussion that he had when he knew that he was going to die. And this quote made a lot of sense to me when I started working through this. And so the gentleman we're talking about is Randy Pausch. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. He had already been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when he was asked to give a talk called The Last Lecture. And there were a number of professors that were asked to do this. It just happened to be that Randy was unfortunately critically ill. And most people don't deliver under such pressing circumstances. I can't even imagine how he felt, but the lecture made him quite famous. His talk to his students at the school was recorded, and it ended up being a huge sensation on YouTube. He ended up on Oprah and Good Morning America, and then he finally came out with a book called The Last Lecture. When I started researching this information, his story was remarkable, partly because it showed great human resilience in such a horrible personal tragedy. He knew his time was limited. He knew the day that he died, as he said, he'd be pushing his family off a cliff. So he set out, while still strong, to do what he could to build a net that hopefully would have caught them. And I picked a couple of these quotes that I felt were really important. Be prepared. Luck is truly preparation meets opportunity. Thought that was kind of interesting. The details on Tony Soprano are quite different. The actor and producer, James Gandolfini, if any of you've watched the HBO series The Sopranos, he was the lead character, Tony Soprano. And unlike Randy, Mr. Gandolfini died very, very suddenly at the age of 51 when he was on a trip to Italy. And it was a shock to his fans and his family. Nobody saw this coming. And the challenge with this was he had not done any planning for his personal affairs. He left 80% of his estate to his sisters and his daughter in such a way that he paid a $30 million tax bill. I don't think you guys on this call, I hope you do, but I don't think anybody would have that kind of tax bill, but without the planning, because with the planning, he could have really helped his family better. So his legacy, he didn't get to write his legacy. He wasn't planning on it. And I find that a lot with our clients and just regular people. We don't really like to talk about death. But if you had watched the last scene of The Sopranos, if you were a fan, you'll remember that Tony arranged a meeting for his family at a local diner with his wife, Carmela, and his son. And they were waiting for his daughter, Meadow, to show up. And it was a very intense scene. He keeps looking at the door, checking for his daughter to arrive. The camera jumps to his daughter, Meadow, outside trying to park her car, and then back to Tony, and the tension builds. Keeps looking up, and we're all wondering what's coming through the door. Meadow, the mafia, hitman, and then finally, that was it. That was the finale. It made me so mad. But that's literally what happened to him because his life in real life ended. So we're hoping to share some ways for our clients and our friends to consider this tough discussion and process to get your stuff in order. So our goal today is to kind of help you start a mental checklist, a process. We've got some really nice resources to help you start that process. But it's all about planning for the future for your family and yourself. And before we move forward, I just want to quickly introduce ourselves. Some of you know us, some of you do not. I'm Kelly Olczak. I am the managing partner of Lindley and Company. We manage the finances for a handful of families in the area. I'm happy to say that we're 100% woman-owned registered investment advisor located in the Bushels Basin. That means we're fiduciaries. Additionally, I'm a certified financial planner and I've held my designation since 2009. Joining me today is Chaz Miller, who is our operations manager, and my partner, Becky Gillette, who co-founded the firm with me, and she's our dedicated chief compliance officer. Chaz is going to moderate today, and she'll help us with a couple things. One, there is a chat feature. If you have questions during our conversation, please chat to us so Chaz can bring these up so I can stop and explain things. Thanks, Chaz. That was cute. You might see that Chaz just said, questions go here. That's awesome. And please feel free to stop me throughout this conversation. What we really are passionate about is educating our clients. We hope to make our clients and our friends who aren't yet clients become more informed, better investors. So let's proceed with this really serious conversation that many families are facing because no one likes to talk about death. So I'm going to ask Chaz, we only have one poll that we're going to ask you guys help us with because that'll help us make sure we're staying on track, make sure we're hitting all the high notes. Chaz, can you launch that for us? Thank you.
I'm going to leave this up for about a minute, and we appreciate anyone who takes a second to participate.
Thank you. How are we doing, Chaz?
We're doing great. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end it now. If I cut you off in the middle, I apologize.
Can you show the responses?
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you very much for this feedback because it is in alignment with what we have recognized. So a lot of people they know they need to do this, but they don't know how to start. So that helps me very, very much to ensure that we're going to help you figure some of this out. And I will promise you that two things. One, this webinar is recorded, so you're going to get a replay of this, and you're going to get the handouts that'll help with a checklist on how to get started. Okay, so thanks for that. All right, so we can see here one aspect of people face is, where do you start? And they think they have forever. And I will tell you that my mother-in-law suddenly passed away a week ago yesterday, and she only had one bad day. But we talked to her a lot about getting her estate in order, and she just, at 87, she still thought she had 20 years. So because some things don't go as planned, as I mentioned, some of us think about if we, imagine if you unexpectedly passed away, like my mother-in-law, what happens, right? Your family is left grieving, of course, and confused about what you own. My mother-in-law did not speak about her intents, and a lot of her ideas are just assumed now. So what we're dealing with now is, fortunately, we found a will, and but if she didn't have the will, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, which happens a lot, now what? Like if you didn't have a will, and your children and family don't know what's next or what you expected or what you wanted. We've, as a firm, we've seen situations where somebody dies, and the family members start arguing because we like our clients to do a letter to their family about, here's what I'd like to see, and this is what's important to me. Fortunately, my brother-in-laws and my husband only wants one blue pot, and one of his brothers wants one of her canes, which is a really cool antique. But if there is no will or trust, your estate goes into probate. And what that means is the court they take over and divides the assets based on New York state law in this fact. I think maybe all the folks that are joining us are in New York. So I did some homework on what would happen if you died in what's called intestate. Intestate means without a will. So in New York, if you pass away without a will, your estate is subject to New York State's intestate succession laws. And here's just a real high level breakdown of this. When someone dies without a will, the New York State determines the distribution of their assets based on their familiar relationships. If you have a surviving spouse but no children, the spouse inherits everything. If you have children and no spouse, the children inherit everything equally. If you have both a spouse and children, ready for this? The spouse inherits the first 50,000 plus half the remaining estate, and the children inherit the other half. This really stinks. If there are no children or no spouse, the estate goes to deceased parents. And if there are no deceased parents, then to siblings. And you kind of get it. Like, we have a client whose dad passed away a handful of years ago, left the estate to mom. Mom passed a year ago, and he's now just going through banker's boxes. And he found a banker's box full of $65,000 of treasuries that were designated to our client's father. Well, she died. So now they have to open dad's estate. And that happened in 2010. So it's a mess. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So I think that, you know, the other thing that happens is, and we've been very good about this, having folks help us, or sorry, rewind, helping folks write this letter to their families about how much they love them and their family experiences and things that they want to remember. In the end, the impact of your life could be diminished if you don't do these things. And between confusion and family's messy stuff, the aftermath of your death can be much more positive with possible planning. But what else can go wrong? Okay, because there are other things. Planning for incapacity. So what this means is all of a sudden, maybe you had a stroke, or you got in an accident, but you're not deceased. People don't even think about this sometimes, but that could be much worse because you continue to live, but you can't make decisions. And if you become incapacitated, who will take care of you? Who will decide for you? And without the proper planning, someone can't make the change. And again, maybe the state makes that decision for you. Um, medical decisions. If your medical wishes aren't known, hospitals have to keep you alive using all their means. You need to really state your wishes now and appoint a person, someone you love or someone you care about, to make decisions in your behalf. That's called a healthcare proxy, okay? A power of attorney helps you make decisions for financial stuff, your banks, your financial investments, your bills go unpaid. So if you don't have a power of attorney, your money is frozen, your bills go unpaid, your investments are neglected. So by appointing a power of attorney, that might help. And it just dawned on me, man, this is a doomy, gloomy webinar, but I think it's really, really important. So please forgive me for being Debbie Downer on some of this stuff. So I really do like this quote, because nobody, even I, do not like to talk with families about one or other spouse passing away. It's super uncomfortable. What happens is, by avoiding it, man, your family can be in so much more trouble. Okay. The consequences of not having an estate plan are tragic. Again, there's another really good quote from an article I read. So common problems that arise when no one thinks about estate planning. Obviously, we talked about this a little bit. No will or trust. You overlook provisions such as guardians for minors. No tax planning. Financial strain. So a couple stories here. We have a family who had young children, and when they did their will, it was a very simple will, and they were in their 40s, never considered anyone passing away because they were in their 40s. And suddenly, the young mother passed away, and we really needed to have the surviving parent update their will, because again, if there's no guardian for the minor, the state is going to define who will take care of the minor's assets, because minors cannot control money. So that's a big deal. Also, sometimes decisions are not communicated to the next generation. Details are not revealed until after one's death, and that causes a lot of problems. Money makes people do stupid stuff. So we encourage our families to write a letter, get your house in order, and write a letter ahead of time and share that with your loved ones so they know that it was actually you ahead of time. Again, I know this is awkward. Been there, but we do hold hands because we've had this situation before where we say, if you pass away, we want to make sure your kids still love you and love each other. Okay. So this is why all of us are pressing you, our accountants, our attorneys, your financial advisors. They're trying to really make sure that these things are in line, because at the other end, while you might not be around, it could be a big mess. So need to spell out healthcare wishes. You need to avoid any legal expenses, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And you got to make sure that the folks you love, especially if you're not married and they're not your descendants, are cared for. Um, Now, traditional estate planning often doesn't capture the fullness of our lives and values. And that goes with some of our clients like to make sure in their will that, Lollipop Farm, ASPCA, Hochstein were included in their estate. Because if you don't name that, it's not going to happen. Okay. So what's missing are the intangible assets that we've collected, which is kind of our life. And there are two types of things that are not included in a traditional estate planning. And this goes to, it's a little touchy-feely, but it matters a lot. So character assets, your values, your health, your spirituality, your heritage, where you come from. My husband just got dual citizenship to Poland after doing a lot of research about his family. My husband is a first generation American. His father survived concentration camps in Poland, even though he was not Jewish during the World War II. And the amount of work he did to find his people is just mind-blowing. And it really has given him a lot of insight, and he's sharing that with our children. And then the other thing are your plans for giving. Like we've got a family that really likes to benefit woodwind instrument nonprofits. If you don't write that down, you may not give to those folks those charities in your will, but it's nice to know your family knows that. And also intellectual assets. We have another parent who was brilliant scientist at Xerox. Luckily, he shared that with his kids. He had a lot of patents and a lot of ideas and traditions, and he had a great reputation. He wrote a letter before he got Alzheimer's, so that really means a lot. Those are the intangible things, okay? And if you're saying again, this is super grim, Kelly, uh, I'm sure you don't want this to happen to your family. So we're going to help you with this thing called generational planning. And what it does, it recognizes that we're all much more than just our physical assets, our house, our investments. And what generational planning, it's a modern, intentional two-phase process. And it's a blend between your investments and those character and intellectual processes. So there are two objectives here. First, legacy planning on the tangible assets. And the second one is the family values, your history. I remember sitting down with my grandfather, who was born in 1916, and he was blind in one eye. And I used to visit him a couple times a year, and I'd always sit on his blind side and ask him questions about his life because he couldn't see me taking notes. If he saw me taking notes, he'd stop talking. But those matter more to me and my family than you can imagine. And so in thinking about people closest to you, here's some thoughts about key considerations on the legacy plan for generations, right? So if you're married, you want to consider your spouse. You want to make sure that you have assets or even insurance that can help maintain her or his lifestyle. Preparing your children, this is always hard, and I'm dealing with that right now with children and grandchildren. Sometimes children need to be prepared for inheritance, and without guidance, they might spend it rather than preserve it. We do a lot of education around this for our clients' kids on, different buckets. Now money there. So in our world, there are three kinds of money: now money, later money, and never money. Now money is like your checking account, your, 6-month uh-oh fund. Later money might be your retirement savings. And so that when you retire, you have money in retirement. In this situation, we're talking about never money, and never money is inheritance. And we do talk with our clients, kids and grandkids, about when they unfortunately lose their family members, what this means to them. And that includes including their grandchildren. And then lastly, we spoke a little bit about thinking about your legacy, and that's where your values and your passions come into play. So we're going to share with you 6 steps in planning your legacy process. And I'll just give you a quick overview. Before I go any farther, are there any questions right now on what we've covered? I want to keep this at 1 hour, but I also know I talk a lot and I like to talk. So are there any questions right now on what we've covered?
None in the chat so far, Cal, but I will let you know if any come
Okay.
in.
Thank you. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this. This is something that Becky, Chaz, and I, this sounds horrible. We are really great at helping our families when someone dies. We end up being their quarterback. And so we have a lot of experience with this. And so we start early with relationships, making sure that what happens if you become incapacitated. And there are some super easy things you can do. Getting your healthcare forms filled out. And before I go farther, we do not give legal advice. All we are doing right now is sharing with you our experiences and knowledge on topics that some of our clients have shared with us. Boy, I wish we knew that ahead of time. So we've kind of incorporated these ideas into how we manage the finances for the families that we work with. Okay. So for healthcare, and these next 2 things are generally driven by an attorney. But if you're at a hospital and you need a healthcare form, you can do that there. But we encourage you to do this with your attorney. You fill out a form stating what your wishes are for medical care and name someone that you trust to make decisions for you. This could be a spouse, a kid, a close friend. It is a very difficult decision to make because this is the form that tells the hospital if you've gotten catastrophically hurt, what your wishes are if you can't tell the hospital or the doctors. Okay. For your finances, this is what's called a power of attorney. And what a power of attorney gives you is the opportunity to name someone to have the authority to manage your finances if you are not able to. This person can pay your bills, transfer money, handle financial matters. Again, it could be a spouse, an adult child. Again, adult child, because we're dealing with minors cannot manage money, a friend, or a trusted professional. Now, a financial advisor can do this for you. However, that means they can't also manage your investments because there's a conflict of interest. We do not do this. But a trusted attorney, a trusted CPA, you need to be competent to sign these forms. Okay, so you need to not be incapacitated, otherwise it will not work. So it's very, very important to have these forms filled out before you cannot do them. So that's the first step of legacy planning. Once that's done, we can move on to step 2. And that's getting organized. And this is where I see so many people going, oh, that's adorable. Now what? Because it's a lot of work. So we've worked on getting these things broken down into bite-sized chunks. So why do you want to get organized, right? So my mother-in-law told my brother-in-law that she wants my daughter to have her jewelry, which isn't expensive, but it's just something, it's not written down, okay? So it would be called a residuary. But in this case, starting by naming your estate property, your house, your savings account, investments, retirement accounts, business interest, valuable personal items, artwork, everything you own. This list goes with you to your attorney meeting to start the process. Knowing the value of your estate is also very important because it will determine what's called estate taxes. So real high level, what are estate taxes? If you have buckets of money, state-wise or federal money, like on the federal level, you may be hit with a trust and estate tax, okay, when you're moving money from one generation to another. You got to have over $5 million in New York individually. So if there are two of you, over $5 million between two of you if you're married, or over 11 million and change if you're married at the federal level. So I really, again, hope all of you have that problem. But it's still something that the attorney has to pull in to give you good guidance. So getting these things organized can be a process. Many celebrities, just like James Gandolfino, have faced huge tax bills because they didn't think about this. So yeah, we just want to get your affairs in order. The other reason this is really important is because if you do pass away suddenly, now your kids or spouse have to figure out how to get access to your documents and your passwords. So we like to we like to instruct our clients to leave a non-legal letter with instruction for take care of, ready? Your pets, your funeral wishes, managing your mail, your social media accounts, where to find keys. And at the end of this discussion, we'll show you how we help folks do that. Okay, so think about those that you love and the causes you care about. So for some of you, part 3 is straightforward. You want to leave everything to your spouse, support a couple charities maybe. Think about your contingencies, which means typically when you name beneficiaries, if you're married, what we see is your spouse is named as your primary beneficiary, and then your children, charities, other loved ones are your contingencies. So what that means is if your spouse dies before you, now those contingencies become your primaries. Okay, so that's why the first bullet says, what if your spouse passes away before you do? Do you still at that time want to make sure that your contingencies you'd already put in place are still what you would like? Maybe you've got grandkids now, okay? So you want to consider special situations. And we have some families that have children with special needs. And if those children inherited some money, their Social Security disability benefits would go away. We've got a family that has a child who lives in a care facility. And so they did the correct paperwork. So those assets that that child would inherit don't really belong to them. It's a special trust, okay? And then again, we're going to talk about preparing your beneficiaries. It's hard to talk about this, but it's so important. And I can personally tell you it's been a long, long 2 weeks, and it's so important to talk about this because if your heirs don't know what your intents are and there are arguments, it can be very expensive. Another example of this is about 10 years ago, I had a family who was referred to me, and there were 3 daughters, and the inheritance was about $2 million, and none of the girls liked each other, and they argued so much they all got lawyers, and the lawyers made out great, the lawyers, the kids were fighting over a compressor, a $30,000 compressor. And it was horrible. And they spent 6 figures in attorney fees. We don't want that for anybody. It was not good. Okay. So certainly, again, not my most enlightening webinar, but hopefully it's helping you guys. So working with financial professionals, and it doesn't just mean financial planners. We're going to get into the traditional part of estate planning. And all these decisions you made in part 3 need to be legalized. Okay, so these are some of the mechanisms that'll help you do this. And like I said, I've been talking so much, I'm dying of thirst. Now, it's important to know a will is not the only way. It's not always the way. However, that being said, again, we are not attorneys. I'm just sharing with you concepts because we have had people say, gee, I wish I knew that ahead of time. What I'm going to start talking about is beneficiary designation on this slide. And it's important to know that you have to coordinate this with your attorney so that the details I'm going to share with you won't mess up your planning if you've already done it or if you're going to do it. Okay, so here are some concepts. Transferring out assets outside of a will. So if you have a retirement account, an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, even a Roth, you will have a beneficiary designation on that account. What that means is if you pass away, your spouse would be the primary beneficiary. And then if he or she passed away as well, and you've named those contingency beneficiaries, then your assets transfer to those individuals directly. That means the IRAs or the 401ks or the Roths do not go through probate. And that means your family, your beneficiaries don't wait 14 months. What we have experienced in our careers is that it takes a month to 18 months, depending on we need, death certificates and stuff, but it's a pretty quick situation. That being said, if you have other accounts like a non-IRA, like a brokerage account or a bank account, there are designations you can add, like a TOD on a brokerage account, and that's called transfer on death. And what that means is, much like the IRA, if you pass away, whoever you've named as a primary and or a contingent, those assets, transfer them without going through probate, which means quickly. And then for a bank account, it's called POD, payable on death. And we've had some families with the bank account situation where they know their mom is sick and she has added her son to the bank account so that when she does pass, he has dollars to pay for expenses. So that is what's called bypassing probate, okay? Another way to not need a will is one example. I'm not going to go into 5 of them, but we see this a lot. The designation when you open an account, like a brokerage account, okay? Maybe it's a husband and wife, and the designation is joint tenants with rights of survivorship. And what this means is if one of the people that is named on the account as a joint tenant, the property automatically transfers to the other joint tenant without going through probate. That doesn't need to be just a brokerage account. It could be a rental property. It could be it's property, tangible property. Okay. I don't know what I just did. Sorry, what happened there? Sorry about that. I was on the wrong screen. Just making sure you guys are staying awake. So these ways transfer assets, what you'll what needs to be coordinated is the way the accounts are titled. So some accounts will be titled jointly. Beneficiaries need to be added to your account. Some trusts, we have a family who owns a camp up in the Adirondacks, and they put the property into a trust. So they needed to name the people that belong in the trust on the trust document. And of course, wills are an important part of this as well. But let me give you an example of a third thing around titling. Cars, when somebody passes away, especially husband and wife, if one of them passes away, titling a car helps so much, because I bought a car at 2 years ago and my name is on that title, so I'm guilty. I need to add my husband's name to that. If I were to pass away, he doesn't need to push that through probate. A house, okay? If one spouse has a better credit rating, maybe that spouse is the only one on the title when they bought the property. Another one that just came up today is we have a client whose grandfather had some firearms in the house, and he dual registered them with his son and his father, so they weren't confiscated if he passed away by the sheriff. Okay. Now, again, all of this needs to be coordinated with your attorney. It's super important. We're just sharing ideas. And for some, estate planning is super simple. The titling and stuff, working through this to require minimal legal help. For others, more legal advice is needed. If you had, like, we've got some families that have real estate outside of New York, that's very important to have an attorney help you with, because now you're dealing with two state probate issues, okay? Businesses, any LLCs that are not owned by husband and wife. Those are things that are so important to have attorneys help you with. In fact, all of this is important to help an attorney with, but we're just trying to lay the groundwork in part 3 to save legal fees. However, like I said, consulting with an attorney can reveal additional options and ensure documents are not contestable, which makes the fee to an attorney very important. And here's why. State laws change all the time. And we've got a client that hasn't updated their will in 25 years. And I know for sure state laws have changed. Legal fees are a pain. People worry about that, but doing this work is not expensive, especially in the long run. Okay, so this is the legacy part that we're going to talk about. And we've got worksheets and guidelines that are going to help you capture memories, writing down certain thoughts, such as what you want your children and grandchildren to know about you. You may be planning to compile family photos. My daughter actually has in my mother-in-law's handwritten notes her recipes, which is priceless. So that's this part of the presentation. So part 6 comes later. So getting the work done is the hardest part, but then keeping up to date. I just mentioned that we've got a client whose will hasn't been updated for 25 years. That's one thing because of state laws. But then again, you might have folks that were married and got divorced. And what we have seen is in this situation, the will has been updated for the new spouse, but somebody never updated their insurance or their IRA or their 401k. And so that IRA or 401k or that insurance will supersede the will. So we're almost finished. Let's just quickly review here. We started talking about Randy and Tony Soprano. I think it's really important that our clients take control of their narrative, just in case of sudden death or incapacitation. Generational planning is super important. We walk through the 6 steps to get organized. like I mentioned earlier, we're going to share a replay with this. We are covering a lot of information, and we will be available to help with any questions you might have afterwards in your own personal situation. But here's what we do with some of our clients. We develop a plan because there is a lot of stuff to get organized. We can help you define, like maybe the first week we work on getting your healthcare directive signed. And then after that, sign your power of attorney for financial discussions. Make a list of accounts and paperwork. Some of the stuff we won't keep. Especially around the passwords and stuff. We have a process for that. Gathering important papers. We have a really neat thing we're going to share with you in a second. But when you look at the checklist, there's a lot of action items. And that's kind of why people stop. So this is something that's very dear to our heart. We call it the Hurricane Book. It's a binder that we share with our clients. And the reason, so it's a personalized guide. Everybody's is different. We call it the Hurricane Book because when I dreamt this up years ago, there were a lot of hurricanes at the time. My sister, down in St. John just got hit by Hurricane Maria, and she couldn't find any of her papers. So called the Hurricane Book. In an emergency, you need your essentials in one place. If the hurricane is coming, you grab the kids, grab the dog, and grab the Hurricane Book. But what's inside is organized sections for retirement plans, estate arrangements, who your advisors are, where your insurance policies are, practical guidance. It does help you kind of compartmentalize things you need to work through. And working together, we can do frequent check-ins and really help you keep motivated because it is a lot of work. If you do not have a trust or estate attorney, or you have one, but that person has retired, we have a really great resource. It's our relationship portfolio. We've got great attorneys that we work with, tax professionals. We do not get compensated by any of them for referrals. That is not fiduciary, and we are fiduciary. So we can help you find resources if you do not have them. And if you're interested, we can do a first blush. We could just do a quick assessment, see, review your legacy checklist, which you will get the legacy checklist at the end of this appointment. Just a nice way to kind of eyeball what you need and what you should think about. And you'll have, if you want to engage with this, an actionable document that'll help you get organized. One of the reasons why we are doing this workshop is because so many people do not know how to get started. You're also going to get 2 handouts. What should I consider when reviewing my beneficiaries? And what should I consider when creating my estate plan? And I think you guys will find that helpful. And hopefully, if you work through this process, you'll be in a more patient, balanced, peaceful place. Yeah. Like I said, it's not hard to do. It's just how to get started. And I want to thank you guys so much for allowing us to help you with this. I want to make sure that you guys have time for questions. And wow, I did that within an hour. I was a little anxious because there's a lot of information to cover. Does anybody have any questions at all? Certainly you have my contact information, and this is very personal. So if you feel you want to talk about this one-on-one, I'm available. And because Becky Gillette, our Chief Compliance Officer, is on the webinar as a fiduciary, I am responsible to share our disclaimers.
I'm sure that's not the only reason why.
Oh, absolutely. And on this, we did have permission to use the information we shared with you at the beginning of this. So that's all I have, unless you've got other things to ask about. I will say, when we're done here, it would be fantastic if you would do me a favor and fill out the survey. It helps us tremendously knowing if we're hitting the mark, but unless you've got questions, thank you, Mike, for showing up. I'm grateful to see you guys. Tim, John, and Julia, I hope this was helpful. And I hope you have a great week. Blessings to all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.